Hi, everybody. If you could just take your seats, we're going to start the closing keynote. Welcome to the closing keynote for today. I'm Melissa Peticolas, and it's my pleasure to introduce Jessica Pettit. Jessica pulls together her stand-up comedy years with 15 plus years of diversity training in a wide range of organizations to serve groups to move from abstract fears to actionable habits that lead teams to want to work together. With a sense of belonging and understanding, colleagues take more risks with their ideation, conserve precious resources through collaboration, and maintain real connections with clients over time. Ladies and gentlemen, Jessica Pettit.
Thank you very much. Hello. So, why diversity initiatives fail? I thought we'd end on a high note. Good job. What is fascinating to me as a consultant that has worked within diversity field for a very long time is that there is a gap in this industry between intentions and application. And in that gap, that is where most consultants and experts or coaches or something like that come into your organizations, into your professional fields, et cetera, to try and do some education, to either help correct for intentions or to help correct for application. And what I wanted to do today was to share that when we start talking about change, there is change both inside and out that is completely in your control, I promise. Now, I have been working with a consulting firm. We've collaborated together to create inclusive solutions. And the idea of inclusive solutions is, one, to get you past application. Application is really only the second step, but most organizations, specifically their strategic plans or their diversity initiatives, don't even make it to the second step. After you clarify your strategic position or your intentions and you actually apply a program, what happens next is you have to really assess the impact of those particular initiatives. You have to follow up, as I talked about in my breakout. You have to monitor what's happening with different spaces, different locations, different cultural changes, current events. You adjust accordingly. You follow up, and sometimes that adjusts your intentions, which then adjusts your application. It repeats itself. The work that we do at Inclusive Solutions doesn't just point out how to get all the way through the cycle, but that the cycle is never ending. And that the real work that we can do together is about creating a more inclusive space, not just as a member benefit that leads to money and profits, but also a workplace that's also a place that people are excited to sponsor your particular events, because the workplace culture and the culture of the actual organization is something that is affirming and positive and successful. In our research, what we realized is that if we can't actually get past step number 2, the idea of we could create a community inside out in itself already gets stopped. Most of the time, these conversations get stopped because we don't know the difference or what we mean by inside and out. So I wanted to kind of clarify. Inside is really literally inside of your own organization. Think of your board of trustees, think about your employees, think about your volunteers, the client's expectations that you have to meet. When I attended the Thought Leaders Summit from MPI a couple of weeks ago, specifically around diversity and inclusion, it was fascinating to me to have these incredibly empowering conversations with meeting professionals from around the world. And then as soon as we brought in the clients they're already working with, I watched them all kind of roll over on their backs because it's like what the client wants. But when we start talking about inclusion or advocacy, we are all in an amazing position to really work with things that are on the inside. When we start talking about loyalty, we start talking about the ability to recruit and retain volunteers or staff. We start actually talking about how things work and how we're different than other folks, whether we're talking about our competitors or even other options for sponsorship monies. That's what I mean by inside. Outside is more consumer-facing, potentially, where we start talking about people who haven't renewed their dues, or they don't come back to the events, or they don't come in the first place. When we're able to look at our industry or our niche or be able to notice customers or members or clients that were there that have disappeared, we can actually kind of assess our outward community and our outward sense of diversity initiatives as well. That's what I mean by inside and out. If we can hold both of them at the same time, then and only then can we assess what is healthy and what is toxic. Now, one of the things I like to say when I talk about healthy and toxic is that in order to do inclusive work, the first question you have to do is, who are you leaving out? So when I come into an association or an organization and we start asking about what is healthy here, what's interesting is people are prepared to talk about what's toxic, but it's much harder to have a conversation about what's healthy. But when I start talking about diversity initiatives, people are much more likely to share what they do to be inclusive, but they haven't stopped to actually think about who are we intentionally or consciously excluding, who are we unconsciously excluding. These are really important conversations to have, and you can apply it both inside and out. When we talk about healthy, I want you to think about your latest diversity initiative plan. Some of you are making a scrunchy face because you don't have a diversity plan. That's fine. You're like most people. But I just want you to think of like the last time something really challenging came up. Even if it's a one-on-one individual conversation. If you live in Rainbowville with unicorns and glitter and you haven't had a frustrating conversation with someone, log into Facebook. Think about Thanksgiving dinner. Uncle Todd? Yeah, that was frustrating, right? But I want you to think that if you engaged in these frustrating moments, conversations, or initiatives, as if that there's humanity there, that this is to make things better. If you're able to look at the initiative in a way that's legitimate, that it's needed, that it's inclusive, that this concept is going to be something I'm going to be consciously thinking about, you're going to actually approach that initiative better. That's not what we do. Typically, a few people are voluntold to be on a committee. They come up with an initiative that they're supposed to be doing, and then they have to present it to other people. Or if you're having that one-on-one conversation you don't want to be having. What happens is that we instantly can be threatened by change. We can be threatened by a conversation that you're not even having yet. You just think it's going to go poorly. The level of threat is high. You see what they're saying are these new initiatives as obstacles. They're really easily able to be invalidated because that's not happening to you. Fun fact, someone is having a problem, but you are not experiencing that problem. That does not mean it is not a problem. It just means it's a problem that you are not experiencing. But we don't think about that. We unconsciously allow things to fail in an environment that I would say is toxic. Now, as a consultant, again, we come in, and often I'm told who the people are that are toxic. So here's fun with grammar. I want you to picture the most toxic person you interact with on a regular basis. Some of you are really nervous right now because you're sitting next to them. So don't use your pointer fingers, okay? But I want you to notice if that person is the reason that you can't get something done, they're the reason you're the most frustrated. The truth is that you are that person to someone else. I want to walk you through a process where I want you to notice what you're doing, possibly unconsciously, maybe consciously, to help diversity initiatives fail, even if you're the one who's like the super advocate wearing the matching t-shirts for it. If we can do that, we can at least become conscious of what we are unconscious of. That, in my opinion, is progress. So, let's go back to this. We're talking about these diversity initiatives. We call them different things, so diversity or inclusion or equity or access. Maybe it's a plan or a protocol or a program or an initiative, etc. You can think about how you could market this or roll it out. I don't mean like spin marketing, but you can think about how you could do that in a healthy way. And all the people who annoy you, they fill in the gaps of all the ways that this is going to fail from the get-go. If you want to flip it out to slightly more intimate, when you talk about your coworkers, your clients, the people you immediately serve, the volunteers, your family, people you're on social media, this also applies. For a lot of the diversity and inclusion work that I do, it's a lot easier for us to focus outside of ourselves, and it's really hard to make lasting change outside of ourselves, especially when a lot of us just showing up to work is already an act of revolution. If we can work in a workplace that is more inclusive and actually respects humanity of the people who are there, I believe we will be more successful. In order to do that, what you have to do is be able to determine your own conscious and unconscious behaviors, what is healthy and what are you doing that is toxic. So, in some research that I have recently compiled in looking at toxic people, I want to go through some of my little friends with you, and I invite you to think about the people you regularly collaborate with that stop progress, that stop change. If you don't want to think about work, think about politics, think about religion, think about geography, think about your local favorite restaurant, whatever context you want. These people are the reason change doesn't happen. I refer to these 13 avatars as change crushers. If you are interested, you can download the full handout of all the information of the people that I'm about to share with you. You're probably going to want to do this. But you go to the website kiwilive.com, kiwi like the fruit, live like not dead.com. It'll ask you, it's funny, I know, but you remember the website now, kiwilive.com. It'll ask you for a keyword, and you just type in Jessica. And automatically in your email, so you don't have to follow up later, you'll get the full description of these particular avatars that I'm about to share, as well as an organizational assessment and some other information. I will not automatically subscribe you to a newsletter or anything like that. It's literally just to give you these handouts because I'm trying to be sustainable. If you would like to subscribe to the newsletter, I do also share with you a video how to fold a fitted sheet. I am a giver. It's like the only other skill I have. So if you go to kiwilive.com, it asks for a keyword, type in Jessica, and then you can read along some more information about the avatars. So the change crushers from my research that I've noticed, there's 13 of them. They're usually friends with one another, so I've clustered them together in groups. Sometimes they supervise each other. So first one we have is the not it champion. These are the people who might have fought for a particular initiative or a particular job. They hire someone to do that job, and now they don't have that responsibility anymore because that's somebody else's job. Specifically in diversity, inclusion, and equity work, this is almost always a woman of color who has been hired to do all of the diversity inclusion work so that nobody else has to. So that anytime anything is introduced or new concepts are come up, the not it champion's like, not it, I don't have to do it. Change crusher. Then we have the historian. I will admit, I can be this person. The historian is the person who says, you know, in 1972, we did something similar to this and it didn't work. Sometimes that is all it takes to completely crush any sense of momentum or change or any other kind of program. The historian is actually trying to be helpful often. This is a trend for the people who are the historians. They want to make sure that I note they're trying to be helpful, but generally they crush momentum. Then we have the themophobe. There's always somebody that people are scared of. Sometimes this is actually based on systems of oppression and power, but usually it's some like board of trustee. They don't even mean an actual person. They're just afraid of somebody because them are gonna not like it. You have these conversations where people are like, we can't do it. Somebody's not gonna like it. The governor's not gonna like it. Is the governor coming to your program? Why are we worried about them? But the themophobe is a very loud voice, and as soon as people are scared, it can get crushed. Then we have the controller. Sometimes we immediately think of like a micromanager who's like cuts time, but this person can also be the person in a board meeting who's really good at Robert's Rules of Order. Everybody just kind of defaults whether they're doing Robert's Rules of Order right, rarely gets challenged. This is also the person who arranges where the meetings are going to happen, how the lighting is going to be, is there food, what's the seating going to be, what does the agenda look like? But you can control for the space of conversations around diversity initiatives to show that you're trying to do it, but you actually can control for the conversation to never take place because you just run out of time, or it's always the last thing on the agenda. The controller, I see her. She's usually a white woman who looks a lot like me and is also a Virgo. So I'm a triple Virgo. Watch out. Okay, these 4 people, just them alone, no matter how good of an idea you have, could easily crush that idea from happening. Specifically in the concept of diversity and inclusion, most of us are nervous about doing the right thing. I did a breakout earlier today and people were like, I don't ask any of these questions. I have no idea what is a state law. Welcome to my job security, right? If you don't even know, it doesn't even take these 4 people to crush the change, but your initiative will fail. So, beyond the 4, now you have the judge. The judge is like, well, who am I to say? What am I supposed to do? Or we say, I think that your idea is cute, but I would like to see it vetted through some peer-reviewed literature, and I'd like to review strategic plans of 19 other organizations in written form so that we can actually decide if we need a strategic plan. Then I will determine whether or not this is going to move forward. Do you know these people? Some of you are laughing along, and I just want to let you know, if you don't know these people, it might be you, right? So let's see what everybody else is doing. That's the judge. Then we have the lefty, so also usually a person who looks like me, who's like, yes, I get that we're doing this. However, what is the new most progressive way of talking about it is this. So then they start critiquing the words that you're using and the Latin root of all the words that you're using to be the most progressive person in the room and pointing out what is being left out in the diversity initiative that you're actually putting forward, even if the variables they're pointing out are not actually present. They still like to do this, and then people get all nervous because we think that liberals, speaking of politics, are actually better at being progressive. That is not true. We just typically vote for different people. They're not necessarily good, otherwise we'd be done by now, but we're not. Then we have the numbers wonk. This is the person who might verbally say this. Their secret missile is the email after the meeting has ended, where they're like, actually, when Barbara made that suggestion, she didn't know the budget line, Roman numeral 7A, in this particular quarter. Do you know these people? I don't read those emails because I'm self-employed. But those people will point out all of the specifics or the data. They need to look at attendance, and if attendance doesn't increase, then there's no reason to do an initiative. A lot of times around diversity initiatives, well, we haven't gotten any complaints. So quantitatively, this isn't true. That's not true. Specifically when I'm working with invisible identities, whether we're talking about ability issues or gender identity or something like that, people need to know how many people exist in order for them to actually be served. That's particularly troublesome if you've actually done a membership survey or you actually ask the information on your registration forms because you've asked for these people to feel welcome. But the numbers wonk will come back and get you and say, is it really that important if it's only 3 people? I mean, what's the likelihood of all 3 people who could die because of some scent in the air are going to be in this meeting? I don't know. That's not really a risk I'd want to take. That's the numbers wonk. Then we have the uniqueness critic. They usually sit next to the judge. The uniqueness critic is the one who's like, oh, well, it doesn't matter what a best practice is. We are a special snowflake organization. We're completely different. I don't care that that worked over there. We are in a different place. We have a different budget line. You don't understand. We have a hiring freeze, whatever. So the uniqueness critic can't accept outside advice or best practices because they are lone wolves, which works out really well when they're sitting next to the person asking for 15 peer-reviewed articles that say something is a best practice. It crushes change and hope. The detail spewer, this is the person who would really love to have a conversation about a diversity initiative, but when you say the word change, what do you mean? We should work with some definitions. I actually was just doing a board retreat, and they literally, the board members, had a 3-hour conversation about whether or not to use a semicolon or a colon in the title of the diversity initiative program. Some of y'all are looking around and you're like, I know who that detail spewer is. Right. If they're sitting next to you, just keep your eye contact right here. I see you. The detail spewer needs to know the specific information to move forward. They also use the lack of this information to point out how this isn't going to work or to crush it just in general. So now you got these people all in a room, and your little baby diversity initiative is going to get crushed. Do you see this? You work with these people. You recruit these people. You often pay these people. You give free plastic swag to the volunteers who are doing this stuff. But wait, there's more. Then we have the process protector. So I will admit, I am usually this person on the board as well, where I'm like, I get what you're doing. However, this actually needs to go up to a vote. Why? The pesky bylaws. And then I, of course, keep a copy of bylaws on my person if I'm on a board at the time, and I like to pull out the actual history of the bylaws so that we can make these changes appropriately. I don't mean to crush change, but I certainly crush people's spirits by making them actually follow the rules in the bylaws. So, change crusher. Then we have the transparency seeker. These are the people who are really nervous about making such a decision, even if it follows bylaws, because other people are going to want to know how to do this. So again, another long-term consulting program that I had was with a bunch of fiduciaries. I had to look up the word too. So a fiduciary are people who manage people's financial estates, right? So most of the people in the organization are lawyers. And one of the things in their strategic plan was to increase the diversity of membership by 10%. How are you going to do that? To increase it by 10%. And they're like, oh, we don't know, but it's just a goal. I mean, it's just a strategic plan. Okay, so it's completely not measurable. Good to know. So then I asked, just out of curiosity, what is the current diversity, whatever that means to you, of your current membership? They're a state legislated association. They didn't know any of the demographic data of their current members. So I was like, fun best practice. How about you were to ask? Like on your membership survey. They're like, what's a membership survey? So the transparency seeker gets really excited about this. They're like, ooh, a membership survey. This is going to be great. We're going to ask everyone. In this association built of lawyers, made of primarily lawyers, I created a membership survey for them, and they thought it was illegal to ask people demographic data on their membership survey. So, as I like to say, those of you that were in my session, what is my favorite hashtag? 3 of you remember. Good job. I was a ceramics major, so you're getting legal advice from a ceramics major. It might be better than your own attorney. I don't know. But it is not illegal to ask demographic information on an application that people are paying to belong, and they can leave it blank if they want to. That is not illegal. These lawyers didn't know that. So the transparency seeker can be the person who needs to know all of this information about 100% of the membership, and until we get that, we're not doing anything. The transparency person may also be the person who's like, oh, I don't know if this is legal. I don't know what to do. I don't know. And then it gets stuck into legal and nothing happens. Again, the theme, change crushers. Then 2 more. The staller is the whoa, 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 whoa. Slow down. Do y'all remember the movie Dirty Dancing? Anyone? Somebody in the room. Use Google if you need to. It's a fabulous movie. It was very, very under-noticed in the Oscars. In Dirty Dancing, Patrick Swayze's character has this amazing idea that he wants to do at the big dance. And what I immediately think of when I think of the staller is, whoa, 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 don't get ahead of yourself. How about the pachanga? This will make sense if you Google the movie, and you're welcome because it's a great movie. But the staller is so condescending in their attempt to help. And what's fascinating about the staller is that it works because you can, again, say you're doing a diversity initiative, but you don't actually have to actually accomplish anything because it's happening, just not yet. And happening but just not yet is typically how Congress works, regardless of political party. It's how school boards work. If we're going to be really honest, it's how the ADA in the 70s started working. It's how desegregation started working, is the idea of like, this is what we have to do. I'm putting a firm foot on the ground. Asterisks, as you're able. If you could make these changes, that would be great. So, ADA actually passed before I was born, and it has not been fully implemented because as you're able is not an actual deadline. That's the staller. Then, last but not least, at least in my research, is the inclusivity monitor. And that is, no matter how many edits you've made, no matter how big your diversity initiative gets, you're probably leaving out somebody. And their job is to point that out, and it's like putting a pin in a balloon because you're always going to leave somebody out. It is impossible to think of everyone. Similarly, earlier when I said that you consciously exclude people from your associations, we've been to so many diversity trainings, we're like, no, we haven't. No, I don't exclude anyone. Yes, you do. You have to pay dues to be a member, right? If you don't have to pay dues and it's free, I bet you have to pay dues to come to an event. That's excluding people. If you can be conscious of who you're choosing to exclude, you can actually be conscious of who you are including. So it's not about including everyone, it's about working with the resources that you got. That's how you don't fail. So with that, these are your change crushers. Were you able to identify yourself? Probably you alternate between different roles. But some of us, it's too advanced to start applying this to ourselves. So when you saw that list, you said, oh yeah, we've got them. We've got change crushers in our organization, on our board, and our volunteers in my house. Oh yeah, we've got change crushers. And once we get rid of them first, then we can do something. Then we can be whatever it is that we're looking. What's amazing to me is what this reduces down to is that you have something, so you're going to do something, and then and only then can you be something. What is incredibly important when we start talking about inclusion work is that have, do, be is backwards. This is free. It does not cost anything. It is backwards. And what you need to do is to be something. Most of your organizations have a mission or a vision or values that you believe in. That is what you are. That is how you be in the world. That is what differentiates you from other associations or other competitive organizations. Once you know how you're going to be, then and only then do you do the actions and the intentions and the programs that your organization does, because they directly align with how you want to be in your industry. Once you know how you want to be in the industry and you're doing the things that are in line with that, then you will have that particular culture within your organization. But we do everything backwards because we point fingers instead of actually doing the real work. And in my opinion, it's a lot easier, it's even more fun to point fingers at everybody who's annoying. I'm not saying they're not annoying. If you need validation, yes, they are wrong. Yes, they are annoying. But I can't do anything about them. But I can do something about myself. So most of my work that I do specifically around diversity, inclusion, and equity access, either through Inclusive Solutions or on my own, is around the concept of being good enough now. And the idea of being good enough now means that you're going to do the best you can with what you got some of the time. So, back to healthy and toxic. Can you do the best you can with what you got some of the time? It doesn't mean 100% all the time. It means some of the time. With what you already have, do the best you can. How many of you are familiar with the app C25K? It's Couch to 5K. Is anyone familiar with this? So, I had surgery a couple of months ago, and I've started using this app as part of my rehab after surgery. So the idea is that you run and walk in intervals until eventually you are running the distance of a 5K. So what's fascinating to me about this is that as you're going, you start off running a minute. And I'll be completely honest, the first time I did this, that was really hard. You run a minute, you walk for 2 minutes, you run a minute, you walk for 2 minutes, and you do that until 30 minutes is up. It was really, really hard. Then, out of nowhere, they blindsided me on the app with a minute and a half. And I was not, those of you that are doing this, you know this day when you're like, wait, what? 30 seconds longer, what is happening? I was completely discouraged. I couldn't possibly figure out how I was going to do this. So I went home, I stupidly Googled the app, and I found the chart. And eventually, in the very near future, if I do this app, I'm going to have to run for 5 minutes. This is ridiculous. I can't even do that. I don't even know how to do that. A minute and a half, like it is a workout. It is a pre-warm-up just to put on a sports bra. You expect me to get up to 5 minutes in like 2 weeks? That ain't happening. What's going on? And instead of quitting, what I realized is that day, I ran a minute and a half in 6 different intervals because I was so mad that 5 minutes was coming. I made progress. A lot of times with diversity initiatives or when we're doing self-development work, we underestimate the progress we're making because we're looking at the end goal. Can I run a 5K right now? By run, do you mean drive? Yes. Do you mean pumping your arms and moving your feet slightly faster than I would if I was walking through an airport? Maybe. That's what I mean by doing the best you can with what you got some of the time. Very few people can say that they are healthy with each other, with strangers, with dear friends, with people they've been married to for a long time, 100% of the time. I have been married for 12 years. I am pretty sure the person on the planet who is the most annoyed with me also loves me the most. The key is for me to take responsibility for how I might be toxic in that relationship. Do the best you can with what you got some of the time. I believe that is what would change if we individually could create a community both inside and out. So quickly how to do this. I want to introduce you 3 variables: head, heart, and action. I talk more about these in my book. If you're interested just off the bat as to which one you line up with the most, you can download my app for free. You can go to goodenoughnow.com/survey and actually fill out a baker's dozen of questions. They're funny. Dolly Parton is involved. And then you'll be able to determine which variable you use the most. I said Dolly Parton's involved, and like people were like, oh, wait, hold on, let me go do that. It's goodenoughnow.com/survey, or you just download the app. It's my name, Jessica Pettit. So what's fascinating to me about these particular variables is that about 4 years ago, I started burning out. I've been doing diversity work for about 15 years. And 11 years ago, I was like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I didn't notice any change in my audiences. I wasn't noticing any change in my own life. Wasn't noticing any difference at all. And that is when I realized that the only other skill I have is folding a fitted sheet. I didn't know how to monetize that. I'm sure you agree with me. That's a stretch. So I had to figure out a new way of doing stuff. And so what I figured out is that our excuses and our failures come from these 3 particular variables: head, heart, and action. So I'm going to briefly explain them to you, but all 3 of these are at play in the change crushers. It just depends which variable is up for you in a given moment. Spoiler alert, all 3 variables are in all of us. It just depends which ones we go to. So, when I talk about head, what I mean here is that it's not necessarily smart or intellectual. What I mean is really detail-oriented. These are the folks that need to know what the bylaw is, or a numbers wonk, or something like that. When they're heady, to me, in my model, it's about being really detail-oriented. That can come in handy. That can also be really annoying. It just depends. Same skill, different outcomes. If we think of lamps, there's a fun metaphor for you. This is a downward-facing lamp. So it only illuminates a small circle. Some reason when I say that, people are like, oh, Todd. Yes, we know this guy. Okay, great. Heart does not mean emotional, but it means connected to really big ideas. So no matter what conversation you have, all of a sudden they're like way far away with a much bigger idea. And it's hard. Sometimes you have to feel like they're butterflies. You have to like pull them back in to the actual conversation that's taking place. If the heart folks were a lamp, they would be an upward-facing lamp. One light bulb can illuminate an entire room, as compared to the downward-facing lamp, which just does the little part you're reading at the moment. These people are often, I recognize the room I'm in, are often executive directors because they have really big ideas and they're completely dependent on people scurrying behind them to actually get the work done. Now, at a conference like this, I bet most of the people attending are one of the people doing the scurrying. So, don't point fingers, that's rude. Okay, then action. Action does not mean exercise. We are not doing a 5K yet. I'm just barely at 1.5 minutes. But action means this is how we actually burn out our volunteers. Because we have a volunteer meeting or a volunteer orientation where they have to sit through 2 hours talking about what color the napkins might be. Action-oriented people, they just want to know where to put the napkins. Get their contact information, call them when you've made decisions. If an action-oriented person is a lamp, this would be a disco ball or like a strobe light. They're not there for the long haul. They're just really fun in the moment. That's how to think about that. Now, when we talked about the change crushers, what's important to remember about them is that they are using all of these variables in a way to stifle momentum, to crush change, and to help your diversity initiative fail. But these are the exact same variables that you have access to that will actually do incredible and amazing work. You just have to tap into them the correct way. Evidence. If we talk about somebody with a super strong heady piece, this is Mother Teresa. If you download the stuff, you'll get more information about her. But basically, she questioned whether it was the will of God to have this much suffering on the planet, or was it the will of God for her to intervene? Y'all have been in a staff meeting with this person, right? It's the person you can't ask at the top of lunch, where do you want to go to lunch? Because your lunch hour is going to click away in the time it takes them to make some kind of decision. But they do know all the information about every restaurant and the history of the restaurant and what happened the last time you went there. Mother Teresa was horribly annoying to work with. And she also did really great work. It's just when her skills were able to be used for good and not just bad. She did the best she could with what she had some of the time. And the stuff that I've shared so far, the chart about what is healthy or what is toxic, is a nice little checklist for you heady people. Some of you took pictures of this. That's how I can tell who you are, because you're like, oh, that's a nice checklist. We'll have this conversation. That's an agenda for a conversation, right? Next, heart. This is Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King literally had a dream, not a plan. He's completely dependent on people scurrying behind him to get things done. Those of you that are actually meeting professionals, what's really fascinating to me is the part of the I Have a Dream speech, that's how we refer to it, was a 45-minute riff over time over 2 other speaking people's spots. One of the big critiques was actually that there were no women on the schedule. There were women on the schedule, but how do you get Martin Luther King to shut up? Karma-wise, that's the only part of the speech we even remember. But they're connected to large ideas. They have charisma. People will follow them to the end of the earth, but they don't necessarily know how they got there. That shows up in change crushers, and that's how diversity initiatives fail. Earlier, I gave you this information about what do I mean by inside or out. Heady people, this wasn't specific enough for you. Hearty people, you were like, loyalty. Yes, let's talk about that. I want more of that. This is a hearty chart because it's really big, big concepts that are actually on the other end of every phone call you have, every meeting you have, every conversation you have could lead to these concepts. Hearty people typically get that. Heady people are like, I'm spell checking. Then we have our action folks. Action, this is Gandhi. Gandhi literally didn't know what to do. So he went on an individual hunger strike because that's how he was going to overthrow the government. You work with people who are this egotistical. They think they're the only person they need. I'm one of these people. I think that I don't want to collaborate with you. And if you just let me do it, it'll be done so much better and faster, right? That's what I mean, that just let me do it. When Gandhi realized eventually, through a sense of compassion, that the work that he was doing would impact people who weren't even born yet, that was when his work got way more unstoppable. But it's through that action piece that Gandhi was able to do the work that he did that was both annoying as well as really successful. The piece I shared that's super action-oriented is this flow chart. And I really do recommend, if this is hard for you, if you have a hard time figuring out what to do because so many things have failed, or what to do because you don't even know where to start to see if it's going to fail, this cycle is critical for diversity initiative work. And 99% of the folks that I work with, or specifically that Inclusive Solutions works with, get stopped at step number 2. They analyze what their intentions are, and they immediately start applying things, and it fails. And you have to go all the way through the cycle, and you have to constantly repeat it. This is how to actually launch an initiative, because it's actually how you build it in the first place. It's how you monitor it, and you adjust it, and you make it even better. This is what to do. I get asked all the time, like, yeah, I get it. We did the research. Yeah, I don't want to do a membership survey. I just want to know what to do. This is what to do. And you have to do each and every individual step over and over and over again. That is how they don't fail. That is how we build community, both inside and out. The problem is, and I can hear your inside voices, is them. You're all thinking about somebody that's going to make this impossible and really hard, even if you took a picture of the graphic. Them are real. I refer to all of them as Todd. And the truth is that I am also Todd. I may not be Todd to Todd, but I'm Todd to somebody. And I believe that if I can take responsibility for who and how I am in this world and do the best I can with what I've got some of the time, I will create a better culture that is actually more inclusive, even for Todd. That is when we will be able to build significantly better and more inclusive communities inside and out. Because it starts with me. It starts with you, our individual work. That is being good enough now. With those pieces, what I want to do is I want to be able to possibly open it up and see what kind of thoughts you have, what kind of ideas you have, how I can help in any way. I also recognize that booze and alcohol is right after me. Welcome to being the closing speaker. So, if the idea is to understand why diversity initiatives fail, I invite us to do better. And I'm here to help in whatever way I possibly can to help you do better. Again, if you're interested in those handouts, one of the other ones I included is a free assessment tool. Some people get really excited about that. It's just some questions. Don't start with the assessment tool with the people who are not interested in this conversation. This is actually what my TED Talk is about. The people who are most vocal about not being interested are telling you who they are. So don't start there. You will burn out. It's called compassionate exhaustion. What you can do is download that assessment tool that if you do, the Kiwi Live thing will be in your inbox. And take your folks out. Go to lunch. Work through the questions. Start noticing things that you didn't notice. Notice what you didn't notice. Notice the work you've already done. But that is actually how you will create an initiative that isn't going to fail, if you work with the people who are actually already interested. If that is helpful, then my work here is done. But I would like to see if you have any thoughts or comments or questions in the time that we have. Anyone? People are like, booze and food, booze and food, booze and food. Yes? Yep. Sure. So just to repeat the question, so if you're working with a board in a very specific industry that isn't as excited as embracing diversity, however, you as probably an association management company or a meeting professional are really interested in including more diversity-based initiatives, what do you do? So first off, great question. Second off, you do the best you can with what you got some of the time. I think it is really important to understand that for a lot of people, this is your job. And you got to pay rent or the mortgage or something like that. And so you can't just go rocking the boat because you got to figure out how to keep your job. And I deeply believe that there is no wrong way to do the right thing, and there is no right way to do the wrong thing. And when I do board retreats or consulting work, et cetera, with people who are not interested in diversity, I usually disguise my diversity talks as a communication talk or as a team building talk, so that I can get into the room. And what I typically find out is that people who think they are not interested in diversity initiatives, it's generally because they feel like they've been blamed for all of the problems. So what you need to do is not blame people and welcome them to the table, because no one knows how to do this well, and nobody is nailing it. So instead of being worried about not doing it perfectly, figure out what they are comfortable doing. Chances are there are diversity initiatives that can happen even in the most conservative of spaces, of which I speak to a lot. I actually work more with conservative organizations than I do progressive organizations because it's a starting place. And it's about starting at what do your actual members need. Sometimes your numbers wonk or your judge might be really helpful in like, look, this is what these members need. Not just coming at it from like, well, the meetings industry needs this. Those of you that are hoteliers, you also have a role and responsibility here because you can ask questions about facilities that starts a diversity conversation that the association using your facility may have never thought of. It's part of the reason I really like working with association executives and meeting planners and convention bureaus is that the conversation is a perfect trifecta. And remember, do the best you can with what you got some of the time. Is better than like, nope, we just can't do that. And there may be some things that, nope, you just can't do that. But at least you started the conversation. That's the right thing to do and the right way to do the right thing. Cool. The hook is to my left. So, any other thoughts or comments? Super. I will be around. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I have the reception slides. Can I put those up? Great. So then I added the reception slides. This is where the booze and the drinks are. You're more than welcome. Thank you very much for having me, and if I can answer any individual questions, I'm happy to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jessica.
That one's not on.
Okay. Thanks, Jessica, for a very entertaining and thought-provoking presentation. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. We start tomorrow morning right here in the Wildwood Ballroom at 7:45 with breakfast with our exhibitors. Don't forget to complete the surveys that are going to be coming out your way about today's session. Make sure to keep those social media posts going, hashtag MASAE18. On a side note, one of our attendees did lose her car keys. If you do find them, please see Joan Mooney in the back. She needs a ride home. So before we leave, I would like to invite our host, Jim Murata of Caesars Entertainment, to come up here and tell us about tonight's reception. So, Jim Murata.
Everybody looks tired, huh?